afternoon, everybody. The meeting is now live. Before we start the meeting, I would like to congratulate Councillor Paul Wynne on the birth of his granddaughter this morning, I think, wasn't it?
Last night.
Last night, yeah. Congratulations.
Hard work. We're extremely hard.
What I'd like to do, I forget sometimes, I'd like to go round the room so you can all introduce yourself. If we start with you, Jeff, and work backwards, that'd be great.
Thank you. Yeah. Good afternoon, Councillor Jeff Elmer, Ellesmere Urban.
Councillor Dan Morris representing Burnham.
Councillor Paul Wynne representing Priestward.
Councillor Steve Davenport, Douglaston Heath and St Martins.
David?
Councillor David Bathmer, Underdale.
Julie?
Councillor Julian Dean, Porthead.
Sarah?
Sarah Townsend, Committee Officer and Clerk to the meeting.
Pam?
Councillor Pam Mosley, I represent Martin Shrewsbury.
Roger?
Councillor Roger Evans, substitute member, and represents the London division in near Shrewsbury.
Thank you, Mark.
Mark Barrow, Executive Director of Place.
Daniel Rowan, Scribbler Officer.
Thank you.
Steve Brown, Head of Transport in the Environment, Shropshire Council.
And I am Councillor Joyce Barrow and I am chairing the meeting. So if we can move on now, please. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Place Overview Committee. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Members of the public will be able to view this meeting using the link on the agenda. We'll now move to item 1, apologies for absence. We have a substitution for Councillor Andy Boddington and the substitute is Councillor Roger Evans. Item 2, does anybody have any disclosable pecuniary interests? We have none? Thank you. Item 3, to consider the previous meeting, and this is the one of the 25th of October. Despite being marked as to follow on the agenda, the minutes of the Place Overview Committee meeting held on the 17th of September 2021 will now be considered at the next meeting of the committee. I'd just like to mention that after the last meeting, we had a complaint from Councillor Roger Evans, who thought we'd gone into private at the end of the meeting when we had a discussion about going forward with the recommendations on one of the reports. As you will be aware, we all voted to have a discussion, but not in private session. It was just a general discussion, and therefore I will move on from that. Does anybody have anything to pick up? Yes, of course, Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. For committees to go into private session, if they are limited by law, what they can discuss and decide, including, as I say, discussion and consider.
May I stop you there, please? We didn't go into private session.
I got
actually,
excluded from the meeting, as did any member of the public.
We were not in private. Excuse me, I will actually switch you off because we did not go into private session. The committee agreed we would have a chat afterwards, and your leader, David Bathmer, leader of the Liberal group, was included in that. No objections were raised at the time or after. So thank you very much. We will move on.
Can I come back with the monitoring officer?
I think I'm going to move on, Roger.
Well, the monitoring officer agrees it should not have happened.
I think maybe the monitoring officer didn't understand it wasn't private session, which I think he does now. But we'll move on from that if you don't mind. Item 4. We have yes.
Just a matter arising from the minutes. I understand that we don't have the minutes from September, but because it will take us well past the sell-by date of one of the decisions we made, I just wanted to raise the matter. So in September, we agreed that we wanted to call for some member workshops on the economic strategy. There was a workshop last week which was involving engaging local businesses at the football ground, which was very successful, well attended, and I attended that. It was a very interesting session, but I haven't yet seen anything coming forward in terms of member engagement. And from discussions I had, I wasn't hearing of anything. So I just want to reiterate that we did call for that member engagement opportunity for some sort of workshop to consider what sort of economic strategy we want.
Do you want to respond, Daniel?
Yeah, absolutely, Daniel Webb, the Scrutiny Officer. More than happy to arrange that. Just to be clear about my role with regards to member development sessions, obviously I'm running a programme of member briefing sessions. These are always with regards to committee items that are due to come forward, so they support scrutiny. So obviously I'm more than happy to do that. I'm more than happy to do that within the context of, and I can see the Executive Director put his hand up. So I'll just sort of say, so I'll let you come in a moment, but I'm more than happy to do that within the context of a topic within scrutiny. So if when we discuss the work programme later, then if this is a topic that the committee wishes to discuss, then I'm obviously more than happy to arrange something within the context of that. But I think this might be superseded by the Executive Director.
And maybe for other members who were their chair as well, it was a successful event. There were lots of people from different sectors, business, academia, other agencies, etc. The intention is that we just analyse all of the outcome of that now, synthesise it into a message. Then we have both something that could be presented to this committee, this kind of home committee for all that work, but then also a wider member kind of briefing type workshop session. So the idea is that we get a draft strategy together for the spring that then could go back and act consultation and can be completed next summer. So look out. There will be something going in the diaries, and we do want to engage all members on that.
Excellent, thank you. Yes, Julie.
So, thanks. Just to sort of reiterate the point that September was about. I suppose what I was proposing and that we voted to support was that there needs to be early engagement to think about some of the principles, in particular to think about community wealth building and some of that element of whether it's a different sort of economic strategy to the one we had prior to Brexit, prior to COVID, prior to the declaration of the climate emergency. Clearly the context is so different, and it felt like it was appropriate to have a proper member workshop to think about that.
Mark, would you like to respond?
Yeah, just to confirm that yes, we are. There's a lot of work going on in the space of social value, social enterprise, and kind of, let's call it, wider community economic lift. And it's also a strategy looking for whole county lift, rural areas, market towns, etc., with different strands to that. So hopefully I can reassure Councillor Deacon that it is a different version to what we had last time.
Okay, any idea when we'll be able to see something on that?
Ideally, this is difficult with Christmas. I think it'll probably be just after Christmas and early into the new year. But obviously well before it goes anywhere in the public domain again.
Okay, thank you very much. Stevie Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. Just raising on the minutes, item 29, we were supposed to be discussing the planning committee structures. Last meeting was deferred, and I was hoping at this meeting we'd have a definite date for the next when that be considered.
Okay, Daniel.
I have been trying to arrange that, and I've met with considerable resistance from committee services to put that extra meeting on. There are two staff down at the moment, and we have the small matter of the by-election, which is stretching resources within committee services, in fact the whole of legal and democratic services, in quite extraordinary ways. So I'm very keen that this is a topic. I'm very aware that this is a topic people are very keen to discuss. We have work ready for you to scrutinise, but I think it's probably best I reply. I don't want to give any impression that we're trying to bury this topic or delay it, because we're not. I would rather do a meeting in December, but I just don't think that's going to be feasible, just in terms of workloads. I think probably the best option would be to have an additional meeting. So we have two meetings, say in January. We keep a single meeting, or we keep a meeting dedicated to this topic. I hope that's acceptable to the committee.
Okay. I have to say, as chair of this committee, I am concerned about the way that democratic services are being stretched. that's one of the reasons we haven't got the minutes from the last meeting. I think they're being stretched thinly on the ground, and I'm sure that everybody here would like that to be looked at. If somebody could look at that, please, Mark. It obviously is an issue. I know it is across the council, but I can feel the pressure as a member on democratic services, and I'm sure everybody else can too. Thank you.
Yeah, just to reassure Chair, I wouldn't take that away.
Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item 4, public questions.
Sorry,
Oh,
are you okay to post and second the minutes? of the
Oh,
25th of
sorry, yes,
October?
I am.
Great.
Thank you very much. Would someone please propose them? Steve Davenport, Paul Winner seconded. Thank you very much. And thank you for picking me up there. We'll move on to item 4, public
Are you
questions.
going to vote on the minutes, Chairman?
Good idea. Everybody? I'm still thinking about what we talked about before. Thank you very much. It's unanimous, except for Roger Evans, who wasn't here and is abstaining. Item 4, public question time. We have 2 questions from Mr. Malloy. If you'd like to ask your questions, then Daniel is answering those questions for you. If you'd like to ask.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, 2 questions, so I'll ask one at a time, if that's okay.
Yes?
At the last meeting, the committee was informed that Shropshire Council was near the top of any national tables for performance on planning enforcement. The data I have provided from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government shows that Shropshire Council has no recorded enforcement action since 2016 and are in fact in the lower end of national tables for performance. Could the Director of Place please clarify this discrepancy?
Responding on behalf of Shropshire Council, Daniel Webb, Overview Scrutiny Officer. In response to the question of performance, please see attached the slide showing the number of enforcement cases that formal action has been progressed during the previous year. Just for the record, I will be publishing this within the next minutes, the minutes of the future meeting, so you'll be able to see the graph then. This is significant compared to other authorities and shows that the service is now dealing with matters quickly and robustly when appropriate to do so. Whilst we can provide Mr. Malloy with data over the last 10 years, the important part to note is how quickly the service is now improving and is now better resourced and dealing with more tricky older cases.
Right, if you'd like to ask your second question.
Can I just a brief follow on from that?
No, there is no follow on. I made a mistake at the last meeting by allowing a supplemental.
I'm just asking if they'll produce my data as well as your own data with that slide. Right, second question then. At the last meeting, the Deputy Director of Place advised the committee that it was not illegal to carry out development without consent. However, this is not strictly true. Section 9 of the Planning, Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act 1990 makes it an offence to carry out unauthorised work on a listed building or for failing to comply with conditions attached to any consent. I know of one particular case where unauthorised work and a breach of planning conditions took place on a listed building near Shrewsbury. The breach was reported on 2 occasions by the local parish council, mentioned in 2 planning officers' reports for related development, and highlighted by a planning inspector in another report, yet officers took no action. In addition, Article 4 directions restrict development within conservation areas that would be permitted development elsewhere. At the last meeting, I sat here amazed that no one raised the issue of the widespread failure of residents in conservation areas to comply with this direction. As a result, conservation areas are becoming unrecognisable, with UPVC doors and windows replacing historic features. So can I ask, if this local planning authority cannot get it right for listed buildings, how can we have any confidence in planning enforcement for the rest? And secondly, can I ask the Director of Place what he intends to do to reverse the decline in the appearance of conservation areas? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Daniel Webb, Overview Scrutiny Officer. It is not an offence to carry out development without planning permission unless there is an informal enforcement action or the property is listed. Furthermore, demolition in a conservation area is also an offence. In terms of replacing windows and doors, this only needs consent in conservation areas if an Article 4 is in place, specifically restricting the replacement of doors and windows, or it is a commercial property that has an elevation that would be materially affected. The planning service does not restrict development that does not need planning permission lightly by removing permitted development rights or imposing Article 4 directions. The majority of residents in this county have permitted development rights, and the reason to remove those should be in exceptional circumstances. Furthermore, conservation areas do not stand still, but change and develop over the years.
Thank you very much. We now move on to the next two questions, which are from Mr. Paul Wiseman. I will read out the questions and Mark Barrow will respond. Question 1. The Assistant Director of Place says that officers rely on neighbours and parish councils to advise them of breaches of planning conditions. However, many planning conditions are not visible, a good example being drainage conditions which are underground. As officers do not routinely check drainage conditions, building inspectors have no power to enforce conditions and must approve a scheme if it meets the minimum standards in building regulations, and any breach would not be visible to neighbours or parish councils. Can I ask the Deputy Director of Place why she ignores this issue, which surely contributes to flooding, and continues to record these conditions as discharged on the local land charges register, which is a false representation? And I'll read question 2 and then you can answer them both if that's okay, Mark. Question 2. Observing the last meeting online, I noticed that a question was asked about planning conditions being recorded on the local land charges register without being checked, and the council charging a fee for this information and certifying it as correct when they cannot know it is, because they have checked. In response, the Assistant Director of Place said that conditions are discharged through a formal submission, but what she did not explain is that this is theoretical, i.e. plans are approved and it is down to the integrity of the applicant whether or not they comply with the approved plan, because no checks are carried out. So just to clarify, will she be ensuring that all planning conditions are either checked by officers or certified as satisfied for the applicant, with a warning about false certification before entry on the local land charges register, or alternatively stop charging for the searches of the local land charges register and advise conveyance solicitors that the information cannot be certified as accurate because no checks have been carried out? Would you like to respond, Mark?
Thank you, Chair. Discharge of conditions applications are required to be submitted to discharge any condition imposed from a planning application. If the details submitted are accepted, the condition is defined then as discharge. The applicant is then expected to carry out the works in accordance with the approved plans. If a representation is received to indicate that the works have not been carried out in accordance with the approved plans, then the council's enforcement officers will investigate the complaint. This may be from information submitted by the public and/or town or parish councils. If there are concerns about drainage, then we will appoint the relevant expertise to assist in the assessment of the works if needed. The process that Shropshire Council takes in following up any discharge of conditions applications is similar to all other councils. Councils do not have the capacity to chase up on all conditions and therefore do rely on information from the public if there are concerns. Local land charge searches are being done in the same way as they have been done previously.
Thank you very much. We now move on to member question time. We have two questions. One is from Councillor Kate Halliday and the other is from Councillor Julie Buckley. So I'll read Councillor Kate Halliday's first. The council has produced future connectivity plans for North East Rosebery and Bridgenorth at the same time as starting work on a LCWIP. and this focus on active travel is welcome. Can how these projects relate to each other be explained? Who has approved, is leading on each of these projects, and could the decision process for this instigation and also for approving any actions which may follow be explained? Mark.
Thank you, Chair. The area assessments in North East Shrewsbury and Bridge North were initiated and funded through the local community infrastructure levy to identify the long-term strategic infrastructure needs of those areas in the context of future development. When the public engagement has been analysed, a report will return to full council for each area detailing the projects, the results of the engagement and options for progression to delivery for each project. The local cycling and walking improvement plan will look at more local active travel needs across the entire county, albeit it will have a regard to other strategic documents such as the local transport plan, the bus service improvement plan, area assessments, etc., to ensure that a holistic approach to future travel is proposed.
Thank you very much. The question from Councillor Julia Buckley is, on the 23rd of the 9th, 21, at full council, members were prevented from voting on a public petition requesting to pause the closure of the Highways depot in Bridge North and Hobnet. Members were told by the then portfolio holder that they had no choice because the depots needed to close urgently due to health and safety concerns. A similar explanation was provided as to why the legally required EISA had not been conducted prior to closure. A Freedom of Information request to list any H&S concerns at the depots has demonstrated there was no material breach at either site. Will the I guess I'm saying EI, isn't it, SA, be carried out? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The relocation of staff and activities from the Bridge North depot was initiated as a result of an identified structural failure of the salt barn at the depot, which meant that winter services were unable to be carried out from that depot and will be unable to return until substantial repairs have been carried out. As this was a reactive rather than planned decision, for which there was simply no option to continue to deliver winter services from that depot, and EIAA was not able to be developed in advance. The service is now investigating what repairs are required to bring both the salt barn and other areas of the depot up to both safe and environmentally compliant standards, as well as continuing the review of the number and location of depots required for future delivery. A report will come back to Cabinet outlining options in due course, and if any options include the permanent closure of the depot, an EISA will be developed as part of the report so that an informed decision is able to then be taken.
Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item 6, which is the winter maintenance, just as highway winter maintenance. Andy, I believe that you are actually doing this report.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, happy to give a presentation on the update. So yeah, in terms of the report that was submitted to committee, we have provided an update on the position with regards to the winter maintenance service. So following on from last winter, there was various issues with regards to how that service was delivered that the winter that we had last year brought to the fore. So following on from that, a review has been commissioned, and the report highlights the progress and the areas of focus. So there were some key areas that the report honed in on and the review needed to address. So firstly, I'll focus in on grip bins. So we have, again, we didn't have what I would describe as a sufficiently robust asset database of all of our grip bins. So that's one of the first things that we initiated, a full review of all our assets. So we've undertaken a survey of our 1,700 grip bins that we have out on the Shropshire network. Those have now been digitally recorded, located by GPS, and now form part of our asset inventory. So that was the starting point really, but then getting a clear picture of where we felt we had sufficiently robust provisions in place, and we've undertaken an exercise of replacing and replenishing those in locations where they need to be. So as a service now, we have a very clear picture of all of those assets. We've also homed in on a gritting review and a route optimization process. So again, this was looking at all of the gritting routes that we currently undertake. Were they effective? Were they efficient? Where did the route start from? Were we getting the value that we needed to out of the way that was currently working? And we've also done an overlay again with all of our asset inventories of key assets on the network. So schools, medical facilities, to see where those gritting routes go and how many of those are impacted by the routes that we currently undertake. So that has been quite a detailed piece of work. What that has led to is, as we expected, some efficiencies falling out of the surface. So we now do much when those routes are actually undertaken. There is a far higher percentage of actual downtime that's been reduced. So the start times are more effective. So when the gritters are out, we are getting higher percentage of actual treatment out of those routes following that optimization exercise. The decision-making arrangements have also been changed. So we are now working much more closely with Kier around the decision-making process and how our operations to actually deploy gritting and get the gritters out on the network is taken. That's been controlled by a key group of individuals who now work closely with Kier. So we make our decision, we review it. That will give us better arrangements in place and allow us to make better timed gritting route decisions and get the treatment undertaken in a way that we don't believe it'll have the same impact on the service as it had last year. So if we can make those decisions early and get the network treated early, that will reduce downtime and rest time for drivers the following day, which will of course then have a knock-on effect with operational improvements around bound potholing and other reactive maintenance activities that are disrupted by winter maintenance during that period. We now have a wider range of supply chain partners to draw upon, and through the improvements that have been realised through the Kier contract, supply chain partners that were not on the contract last year are now actively taking part in the winter maintenance service. So we have more resources that we can draw on during times of extreme weather, and that's started to make a big difference in terms of our durability and our resilience. So the issue around HGV drivers is well documented, and I think through this improvement and these initiatives that we've put in place, we are now in a far stronger position going into this winter. We've also looked at the communication side of things. So again, Fix My Street is an initiative that's being looked at closely at the moment. We think that will enable better reporting in the future. There's work going on with the CSC and our customer service centre around how people can contact the service during this period. And we are also linking this in with the working group that's been set up with parish councils to look at how services of the future can be undertaken. So we've done research into snow wardens and how we think that could work. So could communities locally take on more responsibility for filling grit bins, clearing paths? All of that's work that we think, from a local perspective, would be beneficial to have put people in the community more involved with and have a greater say in how that work plays out. So I think in summary then, and again, the report I think details this out, that a very genuine effort has been made to look closely at the areas of the service that weren't as effective and efficient as they could be, to change the face of the service, make us more accessible, more friendly and customer focused service. But the winter maintenance service has been delivered in a very fixed way for a long time. And I don't see this process ending, because I think it will be a now continual improvement, continual review, and there's still areas of the service that need to be focused on going forward. And I think as far as that goes, we will continue to look at how we can improve it, how some of the efficiencies that we're making this year can realise costs that we can be focused into other areas going forward. So that's where we've ended up in terms of the work that's been done this year ahead of this year's winter service. And I do feel strongly that we're going into this winter in a far more stronger and robust position as a service area than we did last year. And certainly some of the feedback and information that we captured through the working group and through some of the feedback we had last year has informed the thinking enormously this year. So that's my sort of presentation.
Thank you, Andy. We're going to continue with questions. Julian.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not usually one to moan in this way, but this report came to us about 3 hours before the meeting. Winter is reasonably predictable, and we look at winter maintenance every year. So that was a disappointment. And then my second disappointment is that, I remember in my first winter as a councillor in 2017 raising the issue of engagement with town councils and parish councils. And this report is once again saying, yes, it's something we're getting onto, but it doesn't seem to be producing anything yet. And it's clear from reading there's another report working at today on footpaths and cycleways, and that in very clear language makes the case for in-house working and that has improved value for money. I think that is sort of what is being said in some of 6.13, but I'm not quite sure. But is that where we are heading with this? And can we have some assurance that those options for working with the towns and parishes will actually make some progress? Because we've been making the same point for at least the 5 years that I've been councillor. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'd like to respond, Andy, when you finished responding, if you can tell us, we did put forward a lot of actions we would like to see in the report that we came up with. Can you tell me which ones haven't been actioned, as opposed to the ones that have, please? Thank you.
So just to answer the question, I mean, the parish working initiative is like I said, a fairly recent piece of work that's been shaped, and I think it's fair to say that the work that's been undertaken this year ahead of this winter has focused very much on critical service improvements that had to be made ahead of this winter. There was some fundamental issues with the way that the service was set up to operate, and those have had to be addressed first and foremost. There's statutory requirements for us to deliver on, and those have been where we focused our attention. I think there is absolute sort of certainty, and I would describe some of what you've raised as I suppose a shared frustration that we haven't had the resources to get to some of these other areas around how we can engage local communities and deliver some of this work. But it's quite a significant piece of work. It really isn't straightforward to actually pass down some of these services and allow local parish councils and towns that, as much as willing as they are to undertake these areas of service, it's quite a complex piece of work that needs to be developed and understood. So that's a key area that we haven't yet got to. But like I've said, I think there's significant progress that's been demonstrated over the intervening period between last winter and this, and the service will continue to evolve and improve. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If I can just say, I noticed Dean Carroll has joined us, the portfolio holder, and also it was remiss of me not to say that Rob Wilson has also joined this meeting. And if you'd like to come in at any point, please do indicate, won't you? Thank you. We now have Dan Morris.
Thank you, Chair. So I was part of the Winter Service Working Group back in April 2021, and I noticed, Joyce, you asked about some of the things that had or hadn't been done. There was a whole lot of recommendations in that, and I appreciate that service may not get all of those done, but there are some there that I would consider more pressing than others. So, for example, could Andy expand on how the response rate of officers to questions to, let's say, a rural parish council with an icy road, for example. How has that improved from where it was last year? What's been done to help improve that? There were recommendations around liaising with parish councils and joint funding of grip bins, and you know, whether or not parish councils want new bins, whether or not, you know, the parish councils would need to fund those extra ones. You know, could expand on that a bit. And there was also a bit on gullies and cleaning gullies and floods and that sort of thing. And there was concerns expressed about having the right amount of people, sufficient amount of staff there to support the flood manager. And I just wondered whether or not those people have managed to be recruited, because I know that there are a lot of vacancies within those areas. There are a lot of other questions I'd like to ask, but those are the three that I would consider more pertinent than others. So I'd be grateful if Andy could come back. Thank you.
Thank you. Andy.
Yeah, happy to do that. So in response to sort of Councillor Morris's questions, resources, we're currently looking at recruiting technicians into some of the vacant posts that we have in the service. So we will go into this winter with greater levels of resources in place than we did last year. We've now got a mixed economy of services, so we're not just reliant on our contractor Kia. We've got in-house supply chain and other things that can be deployed onto responses to emergencies. So some of the issues we had around flooding last year, we have more staff available to help respond to that at a technician level. We've got three sort of in-house delivery teams who do reactive jetting and flooding work, all of which that we can deploy at very short notice to respond. Those teams have been in place for nearly 12 months and have been solely focused on hotspots, flooding issues, getting to the bottom of deep-rooted sort of issues that have been present on the network for some time. So from an asset perspective, you know, I'm very confident that the asset is better placed to cope with this, you know, certainly flooding and some of the other severe weather events that we have. I'm more confident that we have greater levels of resources and specialist teams at our disposal to cope when we need to. And in terms of, you know, the final point on grip bins, I think fundamentally we had to get to a point where our asset register was robust and we understood where all of our grip bins were. That was priority number one, because, you know, last year we were getting, you know, representation made to us that this grip bin needed filled, or we need one here. We didn't have, you know, confidence in our asset register to fully understand where the gaps were, what we needed to respond to. So that was the priority this year, to get to that position. I think Councillor Morris is right. Again, you know, this is the further reiteration of where we think we can go around parish working, and do we have gaps that could be funded in different ways? Is there more engagement that we could do with parishes to further understand that? But from a resilience perspective, that was the priority that we had to get right this year.
So to come back then.
Yeah, it sort of stretches a bit into the communication plan as well with parish councils, and you know, Andy will be aware of the, you know, the 2 or 3 weekends that I had back in February last year where I was on the phone to him over the weekend, and there were sort of farmer contractors who couldn't get a decision. You know, can you give me confidence that Jim Norris in Cardington, for example, will be able to get a decision on whether or not he can go out? You know, I said again, you know, sometimes we're 500, 600, 700 feet higher than where we are in Shrewsbury, where decisions are being made, and you know, there was a frustration from these farmer contractors that they weren't getting the decision they needed at the time. So you know, can you give me the confidence that that sort of communication channel will be improved this year? Thank you.
Yeah, happy to respond to that. So yeah, yes, I can, Councillor Morris. I think what we had in place last year was duty officers that were responsible for the decision on gritting and when to do all of that. They had the responsibility for obviously having those conversations with private snowplow contractors, plus dealing with all of the customer inquiries and everything else that was going on at that particular time. And again, when we have snow, when we have floods, there's an awful lot of demand suddenly gets pushed onto the surface, and that's difficult for 2 officers to manage. And I think some of that frustration that contractors had about trying to get decisions. Again, I think, you know, the key for us is we have a policy around when we deploy private snowplow contractors, and we have to be sure-footed about making that decision at the correct time based on the information and the information that we have around that time. And I think some of that frustration is genuine, that they did have difficulty contacting officers. However, what we've done this year is through the change of arrangements is the winter decision making about when to grit will be made. That will free up local officers to start that engagement with private snowplow contractors about when we think we need them. And again, you know, this decision shouldn't be happening at the time of that weather event. I think when we've got that forecast and we can see what's happening, you know, we're going to be looking at pulling in other resources to start those conversations early, making those phone calls to these private snowplow contractors during the day. So, you know, we're geared up, we're ready. The replenishment of salt to them is already started. So again, that's something that we've done a lot earlier this year than we did last year. I think some of that was actually happening during the time when we had these weather events. So I can reassure you that communication will be improved and we're better prepared than we were last year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Steve Davenport.
I just know that that team has done an immense job on the winter maintenance moving forward. I mean, today, up to last year, the winter maintenance programme was written in 1992. A lot of things have changed, and I'm pretty sure that the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. I'm looking to get in March, but I think they've done an amazing job.
I do wonder, Andy, would it be possible to collate the information that you get this year? You know, people who contact you, how soon that it's responded to, you know, all that more detailed information so we can see that the service is improving.
Well, what we will do, Chair, is all of the data that we operate on is captured in something called Visana Manager. So immediately now we are making decisions at a key time, communicating those decisions out, and we can see what the impact is going to be on service efficiency, on better decision making. So yeah, the data sets that we have go back numbers of years, so we will very clearly be able to show the difference that these initiatives, these changes have made to the service.
Thank you, Andy. Roger.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I note the report, all 2.5 pages of it, or just over 4 sides. I've also had a read of the April report from this committee, and also the March one, which said the overview. And I also had a look on the website to see where we are. And what came up on the website was, and it's mentioned in this report, Winter Service Policy Statement 2018. It also says Winter Service Operational Plan 2018. This is a scrutiny committee, and I heard what was just said about data. In this report, I can't see very little data except 1,700 quid bins, which is good. If we look at page 1, 3.2, budget available is fine. I'd like to know, what is the budget? What was the budget in previous years? What is the cold winter carry forward for future winters, which should be there in reserves, which can be tackled? I see that in 6.5 it says about the revised route optimisation, which was referred. Have members ever been informed, or have members?
Sorry, Roger. Yeah.
Have members ever been contacted to ask, look, if this is the route that we will be gritting, is there anything that we have missed? I cannot recollect members being asked at all. And I know over last Christmas, I had a report of I'll say the area where it was, Liff Hill, which is very, very steep. Accidents were occurring. I reported it 5 times over the Christmas, and it wasn't until Christmas period was over that it got gritted. It isn't satisfactory. It wasn't satisfactory, and I don't know who to contact this winter. And I would think any member here who has a problem at a weekend or in the extended Christmas period, if we have similar weather, how we will contact somebody urgently. We can go through the customer services, but at times it is urgent, and a member is asked, There's a couple of other things, Chairman, if that's
Oh, that's
okay.
fine, carry
Yeah.
on, Roger.
So there, it says about the operational delivery model, and I see there was a question that asked at the start about Bridgnorth, and the capacity there is no longer available. I'd like to be assured that the capacity at Creighton Arms and London, or capacity in Shropshire, has picked up the less capacity there is now in Bridgnorth. Because if that was used last year and we have a beast from the east or something like that, we will need all the grid that we can get hold of. I recognise in the report that we are now working more with the Highways Agency to do it, but I would like to think that Shropshire Council has sufficient capacity for it. And then there's a few other things in the report. I'm just picking out the main ones, Chairman. In communication, I pick up about the Fix My Street. Disappointed that it is not going to be fully implemented until April. Again, if members had access to that Fix My Street and members of the public, we could identify where the hotspots are quite quickly. And then the service has a working group and it's met with town and parish clerks. Why isn't there a report in here about what they have found, what their recommendations are, what is being looked at? I find the report a little bit disappointing coming to a scrutiny committee. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, Roger, before you get the answer to that question, I have been having a discussion with Daniel. I don't know if you want to come in first, Daniel, or shall I carry on?
I'll have to if you want me to, Chair.
Yeah, please.
I think Roger highlights an issue here, and I think the issue I'd actually like to turn back onto the committee itself. I've had conversations across the council in recent weeks, not just within highways, but within children's services, within adult social care, about the sheer number of reports that are expected of officers from scrutiny committees. Not only the number of the reports, but the general vagueness of those reports. So we asked for an update and little else. So this is at a slight tangent, and unfortunately I have to leave in an hour, otherwise I would raise this later on in the meeting when we discuss our work programme. But I say this as the Scrutiny Support Officer, that I'm having growing concerns about the capacity of the council to deliver the scope of scrutiny that you asked for without any detail about what's expected of officers. We run 6 committees here with 6 or 7 meetings a year, with an expectation that those committees will have 3 or 4 items, lest they be a bit thin. Something has to give. We do not have the capacity to deliver the quality of reporting back to you that you deserve without more input from members about what it is they want and a realistic expectation of what we can deliver. So I just offer this as a thought for now, and I think this is perhaps one for us to meet separately as part of a planning session to ask ourselves what our objectives are of this committee, what it is that you want from officers to support those objectives in terms of data and reporting, and also perhaps an honest discussion about the capacity within the council to deliver that. In short, I think we need to prioritise. Rather than covering everything, we need to ask ourselves what our priorities are and how we expect to deliver them. It's not a criticism of everyone here. I think this is a situation that we've all just kind of drifted into over the past year or so. So I'll just offer that for you now, sort of put some thought to this, and perhaps we can meet at some point, maybe in the new year, and have a review of our work programme, our objectives, and what we want to do going forward. That's all, Chair.
Thank you very much. You have expressed what I've been feeling, that the reports are very just surface level, and we need to go more in depth. And what I would ask, particularly, I think our next meeting will probably be in January if we don't have one in December. What I would ask is if there is something on the work programme that actually members look well in advance of any report being done and identify what it is that they want to know. I mean, Roger, you've done a really forensic job of what you've been looking at, and well done on that. And if members can look at what they want to know from those reports. And I think the questions you were asking there, Dan, you know, you've got things that you wanted answers to. If we can do that beforehand, if you can email me and carbon copy Daniel in with those questions before it ever comes to the report stage, we will have much better informed reports. Sorry, Roger, we'll get your answers now. Andy.
Yeah, so in response to that, I can confirm that in terms of salt stocks and reserve levels, all of our salt barns are now at full capacity. We've had all of our deliveries in, and we're, like I said, we're at the salt levels that we would expect to be at going into a winter period. We've got reserve salt stocks in place, as you would expect, and our sort of improved relationships through Kia and National Highways now means that we have salt stores at Stafford Park as well. So I think in terms of resilience, we're in a far better place. I also referenced the work that we've done on grit bins, that we now have an asset inventory that we can rely on. We've got photographs, information of how much grit is in them. Again, this is all visibility that we didn't have going into the winter last year. With regards to the defined gritting network, that is publicised. It's been the same in Shropshire for some time. The priority for the service was to make sure that existing set of arrangements was robust around the gritting routes. They were efficient, they were effective, the route optimisation was exercised, and then we start to look at what we think the defined network going for the future needs to be, taking into consideration local needs, key assets, but that is a significant piece of work to undertake that. It also has significant implications on our infrastructure and our resources and our gritting fleet, all of which needs to be understood before we embark on significant changes to that. Thank you, Chair.
Roger, if you come back, and then after I'll go to David Bassman and we'll wind this up. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I've picked up that the salt capacity is full. I think the essential question I was asking is the reduction in capacity that is caused by us no longer having a capacity at Bridge North. Has that capacity been extra capacity has been built in elsewhere to take account of that lowering of it, or are we relying on what Highways England are going to let us have from their other depots? I understand what has been said about the other, but if if the service has data which they can easily access, I think that should be provided for the scrutiny committee quite easily. And I would please, can we have that? And as far as the gritting network, I did look on many years ago about the GIS. Am I right? Am I assuming that the current gritted routes are now on the GIS network, so I can have a look at and see them, or is it still being modified?
Thank you, Roger. If you'd like to answer, Andy, and I would request that data is provided to this committee in the new year, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so just to respond, the salt levels are at what they were last year. The fact that we are no longer holding salt in Bridge North doesn't actually reduce our capacity. We have extra capacity built in at Craven Arms, Longdon Road, and Highways England network. Again, that is our own salt stock, so we are not sort of subjected to any risk in terms of that arrangement. That doesn't present the council with any risk, other than the fact that we have now salt being stored in a slightly different location to where it was previously.
Okay, thank you. David Bassman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm too concerned about this report, the brevity of it, and the lack of data, and it's very welcome the suggestion you just made that we have data in the new year. That's a good suggestion. But the other thing which Councillor Dean mentioned, actually, which comes out of it, is my concern about the care contract. There's been various comments about, I think Andy said that there's more mixed economy of services, that we're bringing up officers to engage with local contractors, where presumably maybe that was Kia in the past. So beginning to wonder, we're doing more and more. We're asking local contractors maybe to do more and more. Therefore, Kia is doing less and less. I do think we need to look at the Kia contract. And I know it's in the work programme, But I'd like that to be brought forward really, because I'm really concerned about the operation of that contract.
Thank you, David. Mark, would you like to respond to that one? I think that's one for you.
Sure, I'm happy to do that, and maybe Andy might want to come in with any detail, Zenith specifically. I think that the point in relation to the overall direction of the service and the use of the supply chain there actually has got footprints in some of the workers committee. If you remember, when we were looking at the performance of highways, we were looking at the performance of Kia. There was very much a clear intention to have much more of a diverse supply chain and give ourselves much more resilience. So hopefully, you know, what we can see is the reassurances of that is there and that is happening. Andy's given you the reassurances in relation to levels of salt. The other bit is there's been a lot of work with that individual contractor, particularly kind of farmers and other contractors, to kind of make sure those arrangements are resilient for this winter too. And that includes in some cases reviewing the equipment that they have as well. That becomes a particular challenge, and I know this is a concern that Councillor Evans has raised before, when we do have things like diversions. You know, that kind of thing is a dynamic situation, but I know Andy and the team are alive to that, and you know, looking at what temporary arrangements at times need to be put in place. It's important maybe also in the context of this to understand that we can't just place, for example, piles of salt in places anymore because of the environmental impact and the regulation. So you know, the service are trying to be as flexible as they can. In terms of just as a point of distinction, actually, in the report, it talks about 28% of our network, and it talks about, you know, that being lower than a national average. But think of it this way: we use it in different ways. This analogy, you know, Shropshire is exactly the same population as Nottingham, but it's 44 times bigger. So when you look at those national averages, you know, we're that bigger. Although we're doing 28% of a much bigger area than many. So I think, you know, to be fair to the service, that's why they've looked at, you know, the fact that we need a broad supply of kind of contractors. There is another bit that's not in the report too, but there's also the weather monitoring stations and the accuracy of those. And that goes back to the point I think Councillor Morris was making, which is, you know, the weather where, you know, many of his constituencies is very different than the weather in Shrewsbury. And that ability to really, you know, manage that is again something I know the team will be looking at. So hopefully members will see that there's been a lot of progress this year, and we're going into this winter with much more confidence around the supply chain that we've got.
I don't think I need to bring you into it, Andy.
I mean, the only thing I would add is, you know, in terms of the Kia sort of supply chain, you know, Kia, you know, on every service we deliver have a mixture of resources that are employed directly by them and what they call tier 1 supply chain partners. You know, the benefits that we've seen delivered around reactive maintenance this year are based on the fact that we changed the arrangements around both. And I see that being the same with winter. You know, these contractors have the ability to support the service if we want them to. So, you know, that's what we've been developing, those partnership arrangements. How would this work? And I think, you know, having a blend of resources, some of in-house teams employed directly by the council, Kia and supply chain partners, all of that can be realised when we need it to is puts us in a stronger position, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. In fact, I really must come in here and pay tribute to those people working in that department. As you know, I've had the Stickwood brothers, I hope you don't mind me mentioning them, come out and look at my area. I have to say the service was amazing. They actually looked at where my issues were, and en route it wasn't just about grip bins, etc. They actually spotted where something needed draining. I don't know what to call it, gully. There was a gully that was blocked, and they just spotted it. And the one brother said they would get that sorted, and it was sorted within days. And also a very unused road was full of potholes, tarmac falling away. And again, they did something about that pretty quickly. So this new way of working is absolutely fantastic. Obviously, we need more numbers. We all need these people to come around our areas, and I'm sure that will happen in time. But personally, I want to say a huge thank you for the improvements that have been made in that area. I have stopped taking questions actually, Steve, because Roger and David are going to come in. Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much. We're just asked to note the report. So is it duly noted? Is it really?
Chairman, I've got a recommendation I would like to
Yes,
make.
please do, Roger.
My recommendation, hopefully it may receive support, whichever, and I note the budget I would still like to get sometime, but my thought is that this scrutiny committee note the lack of progress in achieving a number of recommendations made in April 21, and also ask that the website is brought up to date as soon as possible, please.
I would split that into two, if I may. Personally, the first recommendation I can't support. The second one I personally can, but I will take a vote on it. I think the GPS system should be brought up to date. I'm happy to move that forward as a recommendation. So if I can just do that one first, can we vote on a recommendation to bring the GPS up to date?
I'm confused. I thought it was about the website.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, the website.
Yeah, it is the website and the GIS. It's both
That's right.
together.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Is everybody happy to support that particular recommendation? Can we count? So I got 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, unanimous. There you go. And the first recommendation, would you like to read that again? So
Let the scrutiny committee note the lack of progress in achieving a number of recommendations made by it in April 21.
Okay, thank you. I personally can't support it because there's been a huge improvement, though it's not 100%. We're going in the right direction. Does anybody support that recommendation? 1, 2, and yourself, Roger, 3. So that's all. Okay. So we'll just put that one recommendation forward, please. Thank you, Sarah. If we move on now to item 8. Oh no, 7. Sorry, this is yours, Rob. Are you with us still? Yeah. Okay. Footpath and cycle path maintenance. Andy, it's you again.
Thank you, Chair. So again, I'll just give a brief summary of the report that was submitted. So in essence, what the report highlights here is sort of where the services is at with regards to sort of proactive maintenance of footways and cycleways. I think we recognise that people need us to look at footways and cycleways in a different way. And I think, you know, the agenda around active travel and the post-COVID world does sort of lend itself to sort of a rethink in terms of that. There's no shortage of interest and appetite from the service in terms of looking at how we can do that going forward. I think the report highlights the reality of where we find ourselves currently in terms of managing risk. And that's the main focus of the report that came to committee. It highlights the trend data, where the sort of service risk to the public lies, and where we focus the majority of our attention in terms of reactive maintenance, maintenance backlog, carriageway defects. So bringing that backlog of potholes down as quickly as possible. So I think it's fair to say that, you know, as from a service development perspective, the service is in transition. We're sort of operating now at a hybrid model of mixed economy of changes. All of those starts of things are starting to see massive improvements on reactive maintenance, reduction in cost, and a better service outcome off the back of that. As we start to develop that model and we start to get to a point where, you know, we've got a level playing field, I think we can start to focus then more on the proactive maintenance side. This is the area that's been subject to the greatest revenue pressure. Some of these areas whereby there isn't the risk that we had to, those services have had to be reduced. Through a number of initiatives, we're now starting to undertake much more find and fix operations. So we are cutting back vegetation, we are cleaning signs, we are looking at that proactive maintenance. That's good value cyclical maintenance. But you know, these initiatives have been sort of driven by the service improvements, and some of the cost savings that have been made are starting to fund those initiatives. But this is only sort of a year into this journey, and the direction of travel is that we will start to deliver more of that, because I think the public would recognise that makes sense. You know, we've got infrastructure that's looking like it's in need of maintenance, remarking of lines, delineating cycleways, cleaning of signs. All of these things there is evidence that the service isn't touching those in the way that people would like. That's recognised by the service, and we are proactively looking at ways to sort of harvest costs that can then be recycled back into delivering that side of the work. But the focus really has been these core elements of the service and getting defects and the risk to the council reduced through the initiatives that have happened in the service over the last 12 months. That's I'm happy to hand back now, Chair, in terms of that's my sort of summary of the report.
Thank you, Andy. And Robert, if you wish to come in, just indicate and I'll bring you in. Okay, you probably want to come in on this one and on the LTP, I'm guessing. But if you indicate that, if I miss you, everybody else will spot you, I'm sure. So first of all, we have Paul Wynne.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just going to Andy as well. I've read the report. I think the fundamental thing is we need shorter money. The past few years, there's more money in the pot now. Simple as, see how it goes. We've got more money there to spend. Hopefully, an improvement will be seen. So we'll just carry on with that and let's get on with it. Thank you.
Julie.
Thanks. I was going to ask about street trees actually in pavements. So we've lost several in my area, and they haven't been replaced. It's been something that I've sort of been pursuing again with the town council, which tells me that they have both the appropriate stock and the appropriate methods for planting street trees, so that they no longer become a long-term hazard in terms of the maintenance of pavements. But we don't seem to be getting that, and we just have some stumps now left in those areas. And I get several representations on this issue, and it's an important part of infrastructure. It's an important part of resilience in terms of dealing with heat waves and the future and all of that. So I'm just wondering if we're getting there with some way of being able to replace rather than just take out street trees.
Andy or Mark? Andy.
Yeah, I'm happy to pick that up. I mean, we have we have had issues with trees. Obviously, I think Councillor Dean is aware that shallow rooted trees often cause issues with the adjacent footway, and we've now looked at different varieties of trees that are deeper rooting and having infrastructure around them that prevents them from impacting the footway in the adjacent area. So if we have got examples where these need to go back, I'll happily sort of engage with the town council and my officers to try and fast track those going back in, because I agree, there's a trying to get those back in. It's a nice thing to do if we can get that moving. So I'll happily take that away as an action.
Great. Thank you for that. Thank you very much. Pam.
Thank you, Chair. Longest standing council member, I remember in September last year, during lockdown, I asked a question at full council about this very thing, about the atrocious state of cycleways, many of which, of course, most of which are jointly a pedestrian way too. And the answer was given, well, it wasn't really an answer, it didn't answer the question. The cycle paths have continued to deteriorate. 12 months is mentioned, but some of these cycleways, I would suggest, haven't been touched in many, many years, possibly decades. There's ground creep, there's overhanging branches, uneven broken surfaces, road markings that are shattered and broken up. And many of them are just poorly designed from the outset. Travelling up, for example, in Shrewsbury, travelling up Whitchurch Road, you're on a cycle path, you may be on since a meal, it just suddenly disappears. There's nowhere to go. You're just dumped into the middle of traffic. So it's not just the maintenance, it's actually the poor design from the outset. I myself had an accident on a cycleway in January, purely to do with the lack of maintenance. And I reported it, and strangely enough, it was addressed the next day. So I hope that everybody gets the same service as I got. It's mentioned in the report about insurance claims, and it's shown that very few cycle accidents seem to be subject to insurance claims. I suspect that many, like mine, are not reported. They're relatively minor, but they just don't get reported, and they're treated less well than highway vehicular accidents, because they don't carry the same cost. Obviously, somebody in the car does a lot more damage, possibly to property and persons. Incidentally, in the Times today, there's an article up here entitled "Town Halls Losing Battle with Potholes." And a gentleman called Jack Cousins, who's head of roads policy at the AA, said, "The government wants more people to take up cycling, but coming down to the front door to see a moonlight surface doesn't provide confidence. And he added, with residential roads in England being resurfaced once every 105 years, those that are lucky enough to experience this rarity should probably hold a street party, as they won't see it again in their lifetime. And I think there's quite a lot, joking aside, I think there's quite a lot to do with that. So really, I'm just pleading that words are actually translated into actions, because this is an area which has been neglected for so long. We're trying to get people using active travel modes, and it's got to be good enough. It really has. Some of these paths are just not safe, and that puts people on. It really does. So I hope that we actually do see some action from this report.
If I can just remind everybody that the paper actually says identify areas of concern not already considered within the report for consideration as part of the ongoing service improvement. And I think you've raised a few issues there, which maybe we can pick up on. Steve Davenport.
Yes, I think you've heard me say before that we've Shropshire County had grants for building new cycleways, and I have said this before, what we should be doing is ploughing that money into putting the cycleways we've already got into a good condition. Of course we need more walk and cycling, but I'd rather see anything we get put into the ones we've already got.
Okay, thank you. Rob, do you want to come in on this, or do you want to speak on the LCP?
Yes, please, Chair.
Please do.
I think following on from Councillor Mosey, I think she's raised an important point. I think I'd like to hear from Andy what data he thinks we need to be collecting in the future to make sure we're making the right decisions on this. I think considering insurance risk is one. I think Councillor Mosey rightly probably identifies that those driving a motor vehicle may be more likely to claim than someone walking or cycling, and that I know there was an example from Sweden where they also started to look at sex disaggregated data when they were cleaning paths for snow in the winter. And they found that actually it was cheaper for the council to clear footpaths first and then roads second, and that may be something to go away and consider whether there's an issue there. I think if I may, just one point that really stands out is that in 3.1 it says we have a duty to maintain the highway, including footways and cycleways, to a safe and serviceable standard. And in 3.2 it says we're not able to undertake as much basic maintenance as required. I find those two statements contradictory, that I think basic maintenance is what's required to maintain something to a safe and serviceable standard. So if we're not doing 3.2, then we're not fulfilling 3.1, and then the conclusion in 7.2 that it demonstrates we're meeting our duties under the Highways Act is difficult to concur with. I don't know if Andy wants to comment on those. I've got a couple of other bits that are.
Yeah, more than happy to do that, Councillor Wilson. So I think, fundamentally, I think the report does set out the finance challenges, the revenue budget position, because when new cycle infrastructure over the years has been put in place, what hasn't followed it is commuted sums to take care of the ongoing maintenance. And there's a big difference between something being safe and something being serviceable. So in terms of safety, our policy is quite clear on what a footway or cycleway defect is. But what we're talking about here is refreshment of lining, the ability to make these assets look attractive, that people want to use them. And I think that's the gap. We haven't been undertaking routine maintenance of cutting back sort of vegetation, cleaning signs, relining them, making them attractive and looking like they're loved and cared for. That's the gap. So that's the focus, I suppose, in terms of service development. How do we get to a position where we can make our budget stretch further so we can undertake proactive maintenance of these assets? Because that's the aspiration for us as a service. I think this is a shared frustration, really, that we're talking about here. So that's going to be the direction of travel for us.
I think I'd like to hear more about what data we need to be collecting, so we know we are able to, as a scrutiny committee, the scrutiny committee is able to make good decisions, and the department's able to make good decisions. Just two examples from my area. I know the footpath along the Mount, it is very overgrown, therefore it's very narrow purely because of undergrowth, and I would say that makes it difficult to say it's safe and serviceable. And the cycle path along Shelton Road right now is covered in dry leaves, which are relatively okay from a bike, but that will become very slushy and compacted very soon. And is there a cost implication of delaying clearing those leaves? I witnessed, I think, the one through Sutton Farm last year. I think it took the guy doing it over a week to complete because there was such a volume of compacted wet leaves, rather than clean them up when they're dry. So that there is obviously a funding or a cost implication there.
Rob, if I can just say, this isn't just you that's got this issue. I think every single member here has.
Yeah.
I actually wonder whether there is any way, because usually all that mess and the shortening of the width of the footpath is caused by landowners who just let everything grow over. And I'm wondering if there's any way that we can actually hold those landowners responsible for cutting back those verges and clearing up the mess from their properties. Just a thought, Mark, I don't know, is there anything we could possibly do with that? Because I've thought that for a long time. I know I've got very narrow footpaths. I'll park that up with you while Andy answers Rob's questions. I'm sorry I jumped in there.
So yeah, just to pick up on a couple of points. So I think there is something about data. There is something about, looking at the frequency of usage, and again, some of the seasonal issues that Councillor Wilson highlighted. I think that's all very valid. And again, informing the service operational plan going forward about how some of this would work. I'm conscious that some of this is linked to street scene, which is something that Steve Brown looks after. So I'd let Steve comment on some of the sweeping frequencies, but all of this stuff needs to be considered and I guess captured. So, some of the local issues are addressed going forward. But I think these are all valid. These are all valid comments. And I think things we need to consider.
Steve, if you want to come in and then we'll go to Mark.
Thank you, Chair. I might be able to assist. So if a landowner has got some overgrowth and that's impacted on the public highway, which under the definition includes footpaths, then action can be taken. Normally that's a discussion, normally that's a request, but ultimately we can follow that up with a letter that says that if action isn't taken to rectify that, we will undertake the work and can recharge. So there is an escalation process for areas such as that. And again, with the routine sort of cutting back, it's an area that does need to be looked at and considered. So we can have a look at those. We can have a look at those schedules, and also, picking up the issues under the Highways Act. There's new guidance and legislation that's come out now, so we need to sort of refer to that and not solely the Highways Act as well. So it is a combined piece of work that we will do. We will do as a department across the two working areas.
Okay, we'll go to Mark and then we'll have you, David, and then we'll wind up. Okay.
I think Steve's answered the main point in there. However, it could be a recommendation of this committee that we engage in an active media campaign. There's no reason why we couldn't, this time of year, through social media or other forms of media, kind of be appealing to those householders that do have overgrown hedges and do have kind of trees. Whose leaves are we picking up is the other bit here, actually. There's nothing stopping a lot of people taking some self-responsibility for that. Everyone has a view on how much council tax they pay, but yet, how many people actually go out and tidy up, from their hedges and from their trees and all the rest of it. And maybe a suggestion, Chair, that we engage in that. I think one of the sensitive bits that we do pick up is, often it's briars or brambles or things that are particularly dangerous. And that is an issue. And I know we're talking about footpaths and cycle routes here, but visibility displays and safety is an issue of concern. So I think the appeal to members and parish councils is always to let us know when there's a real kind of significant health and safety concern in that way, and then they're the kind of thing Steve's team will be able to focus on most appropriately.
Yeah, I think the thing I'm thinking about is the verges that overgrow. The soil runs down, and you can't get pushchairs on the pathways because I've got that issue, and that's my major concern because you need somebody with a stake to go and dig it out. Rob wants to come back, and then we'll go to David.
Very, very quick. Thank you, Chair. I think I agree with Mark's point that I think communication with the public to say, point out these areas so we can actually go and address them. And also your point, Chair, about the overgrowth coming from landowners, and particularly, I'm just thinking now that it seems to follow, particularly when new developments are constructed along the highway, that there is soil that creeps over and then the vegetation is able to grow. And maybe that's the particular area we need to look at, is where new developments are built.
Absolutely, yeah, thank you. So we'd like somebody else to come up with a wording for this recommendation. I think we should do it. Anybody any good with words? Nobody's not. So, what did you say that was the recommendation was, Mark? And then we'll put it in our words. That we have a social media campaign.
Yeah, I mean, maybe one recommendation is that members of the committee support an active media campaign in relation to promoting overgrowth of hedges, verges, adding your BCN chair as well.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's something about that, I think.
Social media campaign, yeah.
And then reporting to the council, any significant, if there is an issue of concern, health and safety concern.
Okay, I think Daniel's getting that down. We'll just wait a second to read it back. Make sure we're all happy with it.
Yeah, so I've got support an active media campaign with regards to overgrown hedges and foliage. So,
you said it so quickly.
Sorry, I'll say it again. That's what I've got so far, to support an active media campaign with regards to overgrown hedges and foliage.
Should that not say where it encroaches upon?
Yeah.
Where it encroaches.
Just join the committee now.
Upon footpaths and cycle paths.
So what are we encouraging the active social media campaign to do?
To make people aware that they should be cutting back their hedges and
so
clearing up leaves. And for me, the important thing is that landowners clear any soil that goes on footpaths and cuts them back.
So does that need to go into the recommendation? Is that being put into
that is passed, yeah. Are you getting that right? Can we vote on that? I have coming back to you. Did you want to answer it?
Well, no, can I just make a point about this? Is that I do feel difficult about this because we're encouraging people to take action to cut back hedges and collect leaves when we ourselves are not maintaining the footways properly and the cycleways properly. So it seems to me, we should make a commitment here to that Shropshire Council improves its maintenance of footways and cycleways, as well as encouraging other people to take action. But it seems to me otherwise we could have been completely hypocritical.
It was 50-50, isn't it, really? It's down to people to do what they're doing, and we will do whatever is within budget. I think that's what it's saying in the report, isn't it? We do have money now, don't we, to improve footways?
I think just to clarify that, Chair, so members will remember that there's an administration priority to invest additional resources in highways and footpaths. There's an explicit bit in there, and there's an acceleration of some capital money this year. But that programme really kicks on at scale next year. That's the assumption that we're planning for. Just to reassure members, that includes footpaths.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So if we can vote on that, please. Anyone in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. So we'll now move on to.
Can I just make a point? There's another point, Chair, on this report, and one's sounding very boring, but I noticed on 6.15, for example, in reference to Kier again, development of in-house workforce supplementary work being carried out by Kier, and then 6.16, Kier to focus their resources on a more complex, larger maintenance programme, which would be interesting to know what that is. So that we basically sounds like an in-house team taking over carriageway defects for footways and cycleways. So, again, the issue of Kier, presumably this work has been done by Kier in the past, and that now what's happening is we're bringing in people, our own in-house team to do that work. So that has a consequence, I would assume, for the Kier contract. And I do think we, constantly, we need to look at that in more detail.
I hear what you're saying. We're doing their work, is what you're saying, or what they're paid to do. Did you want to say a comment on that at all, Mark? Or?
I can do a high level piece. I'm sure Andy might come in with some detail, Chair. But no, I think it's a stated aim of ours to make sure we have more of a mixed economy, and as I said earlier, be more resilient. What we've understood is that we get less value out of this arrangement by Kier focusing on particularly the bigger, more strategic pieces of work. and more of those kind of day-to-day jogging things are done in a more flexible way with a different crew. And that's, I think, really what this is saying, is that, you know, a lot of those small frustrating bits that people see from time to time, actually, a kind of whole schedule arranged approach and with here is maybe just, you know, it wasn't delivering what we wanted, so we've changed and we've addressed that. So I don't see it as inconsistent. What we're really saying here is we're focusing here on where we get best value for money.
Okay, that's fair enough. Where does the recommendation go from here, by the way?
I think what we're doing, I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I think I mean, you're free to make a recommendation to anyone you want to be honest. I mean, you could either put this through to cabinet. I'm not that doesn't really go very far. You could also make the
I'm thinking, Dean's going to come in. I was just going to say, can we send it to Dean? If you'd like to come in, Dean.
Yes, Chair. I'm more than happy for you to send that to Steve Smith and myself. Obviously, I'm here, Mark's here, and is here, Steve's here. We've heard it loud and clear. I don't think we can disagree with any of the recommendations that you've added on this point. So by all means, send them through to myself and Steve, and we will pick them up.
Okay, thank you very much, Dean. Thank you. On that note, we will now move on.
Just one more thought, Chair. Actually, you might wish to just briefly note this to cabinet for their regular scrutiny items as well going forward.
Good idea. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you very much. Thank you. We'll try again to move on to item 8. So item 8 is the local transport plan for LPT4. Steve Brown, you're going to present.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to introduce the report. The report really sets out an approach and a direction of travel and intent in order to bring forward the local transport plan for Shropshire, which will be a county-wide document, and look at all of those issues and agendas across Shropshire. So really, within the transport world and within Shropshire, there is a lot of work going on at the moment, and there is a lot of activity. So again, with bringing forward a transport plan, linking that into the council's local plan, linking that into other key sorts of strategies and documents, big town plan, linking it into the Oswestry movement strategy, look at any work we might be bringing forward in the south of the county, in Aboriginal. There's a sort of a suite of documents there that we'll be able to bring together in almost a Venn diagram approach. And as the front page of the report says, considering also that if we're successful in any element of the bus service improvement plan, and picking up on the previous conversations, that we're already sort of in development of the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan as well. So bringing all of those elements together and bringing forward a coherent plan for Shropshire to take that forward. So the recommendations do sort of lay out for support for the work that we've done to date, and more importantly, there's a recommendation in there that, assuming that the LTP4 report and attached plan is approved by cabinet in the sort of the spring, early summer period, that there is a governing body, that there is a portfolio holder that's appointed to oversee that work, that would meet on a quarterly basis, that would produce an annual plan to say that what's been developed on LTP4, what activities have been achieved, what is in planning for progression for the following year. That could be brought back to scrutiny, but an annual cabinet report would be done to make sure that that work is embedded and enshrined, and the outcomes of delivering on that transport plan are captured. We are looking at an old council solution, so transport in itself is an enabler and is a conduit. So the work that we're doing at sort of Mile End to support the business park, the work that we're doing, you know, in Shifnal is not about just improving transport. It's about remodelling the town centre as well. So the transport plan will assist in the making of place. It will assist in the improvement of areas, and will support, and especially where we work you know, in real close association with colleagues and economic growth on sort of joint agendas. That's a really important point to make. And again, you know, as we've referenced in the bus service improvement plan, those issues of connectivity, those issues of getting people to education, social interaction, service in the nighttime economy are all issues that we need to bring forward. So there's a lot of work going on. There's a lot of work being undertaken. There's still more work to bring forward a draft plan to scrutiny in the sort of February-March period. Committee will note that on the sort of the itinerary list for the work that we're undertaking, we've already done a number of themed workshops that have been done under a number of headings, so economic and growth, transport, education, and we've met with a number of groups, and we've updated and sought their views on that. We've got young persons workshops being planned and ready to be prepared. There's a members workshop that's on the plan for in January, and again picking up on the point that Mark Barrow raised earlier, when we've started to pull all of that evidence and data and synthesised all of that and pull that forward, then at that point we can sort of present to a members workshop and get members involved in that. Then the process would be that we would take the draft plan to cabinet, ask for that then to go out to full public consultation, do any refinements or amendments from that consultation, and then bring back a final draft report to the cabinet for consideration. And within that, we'll be working with colleagues across the county and across the council as well to embed some of these issues. So we know about public transport, we know about decarbonisation, we know about electric vehicles, and looking at all of those agendas, we know about walking and cycling, and we've already commissioned that walking and cycling infrastructure plan. So we're planning and we have proper designs about moving forward on that agenda. So the transport planning itself is a key statutory document of the council. We need to bring that forward, and the report, you know, details and alludes to that. The transport plan will be part of the local plan. It will be part of the big town plan, the Oswald plan. It will be part of the bus service improvement plan if we're successful on that, and it will be part of the local cycling walking infrastructure plan. So we will knit all of that together in a coherent overview. There's still much work to be done, and just to give the committee assurance that we're managing this project via a project board which has got a cross section of officers across the council, so planning officers, economic growth officers, public health, visitor economy, culture and leisure, and obviously highways and transport are all on that in bringing that forward. Just to sort of finish up on that, we've also got workshops for portfolio holders and deputy portfolio holders in order to sort of bring up that level of understanding, and a local transport plan would be important. And also because of recent announcements from the DFT on potential changes in guidance to local transport plan, we have a meeting in the diary for this month with the Department of Transport to go through that and to understand what changes in guidance would be, and how best as an authority we would handle that. So the report sets out an approach, it sets out some of the work that we've got, it sets out some of our sort of draft intentions with the aims and objectives that we'd like to do. It sets out a time scale for the delivery pathway to bring that forward. We're about sort of 55% completed on bringing forward the transport plan, but that on its own, you know, it is integral to some of the other work. It is integral to the other agendas that we've got in structure, and will enable and enhance and support that work to come through. More importantly, it will allow us, you know, when going back to central government or to other government bodies, you know, to be able to fight Shropshire Council's cause, you know, more robustly. We'll be able to point to, you know, an approved transport plan that has been consulted on, being mandated by Cabinet. It's got the support of colleagues across the council and other key bodies as well that we'll be talking to. So it will put us in a stronger position in chasing down external funding to support our ambitions for transport and enabling transport to support communities' economic growth and the development of place within Shropshire. So I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Steve. A huge piece of work there. Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it is huge. And I note in the report it says whole council solution. And one of my thoughts is that you as chairman take it to the other chairman to see should it overseen by performance scrutiny or this one, because it does involve some of the other scrutiny committees and the work that they cover. There needs to be some coordination because it is large, it is big, it is important for the whole council. However, on this report, I note in the risk in assessment and opportunities appraisal about the risks, because this council is not fulfilling the statutory requirement to have a local transport plan. I'm not sure what that effect is, whether that has affected any bids that we've put into government because it isn't there. I note that we started it in 2018, employed WSP, and there's a report came here, I think, or 9th in December 2020. I presume that has been superseded by this, but I think it would be interested to see what that report had so that we don't go over that to do it again. And also I see on page 3, it says the process of developing the next LTP may deliver several specific supporting policies that need to be covered. So what I would ask is that, yes, this is a report, it is important. I see on the milestones that are in the report, there is no reference about taking it to any scrutiny committee at all. There was a...
I think there's is it within the recommendation?
It's this one. It's in with the recommendations, but in the report itself, programme and key milestones, the only time scrutiny appears is November, which is this one. Now, which scrutiny committee you went to, I would suggest, Chairman, maybe discuss it with the other chairman to see where it goes. I could make comments on the recommendations, but on the report, yes, it's urgent. We do need to do it, but I would also like to know is what happened to the previous report. I would assume we spent a fair bit of money, a fair bit of time and officer time in preparing it. Is any of that information being brought into this? Because there's no reference at all about any previous work that was carried out. I'll stop there at present, Chairman.
Thank you. I have noted you want to speak, Rob, but Steve's going to answer first, please. Thank you.
So just to pick up on some of Councillor Evans' point, the fourth bullet point on the recommendations to say that we would intend to bring sort of the draft plan back to this scrutiny prior to going to Cabinet in the sort of February-March period. So we would intend to do that. We have brought the LTP to scrutiny before, and it's referenced within the rear of the report. And of course, you know, we had some sort of changes, and we've had also the pandemic as well. So to give the reassurance that the budget that we've got to deliver the LTP for, it is within that budget. It is earmarked, and any work that was done previously in the development of that, we've used and transposed into that, and make sure that that evidence and data is still live and is still valid. So that sort of hiatus has had no sort of detriment on this as well. So it can be assured of that. The report does reference that the previous LTP3. So just to be clear on that, there was an LTP3 report back some years ago that was brought forward. It was brought to scrutiny. It was never formally endorsed by the cabinet, but it is located on the council's website, and part of this work is to bring that forward and finalise that work. And it is referenced within this report, and it was referenced within previous scrutiny report that we brought forward at the time, I recall.
Thank you. Rob, would you like to come in there?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to thank you. I think it's a really good direction of travel for the council. I think there's lots of really good sense of direction in the report and the way LTP4 is headed. I think it's good that it recognises how much transport hits across every service area and every resident. I think everything starts and ends with transport. A question just for Steve is that obviously LTP3, although not adopted, said lots of good things about hierarchy of users and about decarbonisation, etc. But maybe we didn't get as far with that as we wanted over the previous period. How will LTP4 have the teeth to make sure that kind of stuff does start to happen? How can that be built in?
I think to answer your point, Councillor Wilson, the report does reference that the LTP4 that we'll be bringing forward will be slightly different. So we could be looking at more at those high-level things in those policies and just refer to that. The teeth that you refer to is in the recommendation that we would like a portfolio holder. So presumably the portfolio holder for highways to be responsible, to have a sort of a governance board that as a quarterly report, this is post approval of LTP4, as a quarterly sort of performance review of how that document and policies are moving forward, and then an annual report is produced then to clearly articulate that and make sure everybody's aware of that, and also whether that draft annual report comes back to scrutiny, for sort of any sort of oversight before it's released. So to really embedding some of those work, and for members of the committee to understand that the LTP4, it will range from being really strategic, so some of those issues will take a number of years to bring through, but also it will support, locally, it will support in neighbourhoods, and it will allow us to lever in things as well. So there will be some tangible immediate benefits as well, but we would like to make sure that there is an oversight of that we're reported on a quarterly basis, and that an annual report is produced that either scrutiny or is referred to Cabinet as it lays out in the recommendation, to make sure that this is done, and it links in then. So apologies for labouring the point, it is not an end in itself. It links into the local plan, it links into the economic strategy, and effectively the local plan, the transport plan and the economic strategy, it's effectively a Venn diagram and managing those shaded areas where we get maximum value as a council. That would be the job of the work, to make sure that we fulfilling those opportunities. As I would point to sort of Mile End in Osprey Street, while we're bringing forward a business park, or we're building the road, well, one is dependent on the other, and the two teams are working extremely well to deliver that project, and that is the case in point.
When would be a timely time for scrutiny to look at this again, would you say? Mark or Steve?
To me, Chair, we've sort of indicated that we would like to get a draft of the LTP to Cabinet around the sort of February, March, April time. We still need to do a bit of work, so it wouldn't ideally need to come to scrutiny just before that.
Okay.
To make sure that it was worked through. And remember as well that before that, we've identified in the report that there will be a members' workshop, and we will sort of facilitate that as well. So around that February period seems to be feel right.
Okay, thank you very much, Julian.
Sorry, just very quickly, what's one more, Chair? Sorry if I may. Well, I'm just one little one. I think when we're talking about active modes, Steve, I think our language needs to be stronger. I think we're using the word enabling. Sorry, we're using the word encouraging quite a lot. That appears every time we talk about active modes. I think we need to be talking about enabling or facilitating, given all the government targets and guidelines that are coming out.
Okay, thank you. Julian?
Thanks very much. There's a lot in this which I do welcome, and in particular, I welcome the performance board. I think that's great. If that's a model for overseeing strategy development, then perhaps it's one we could look at for some other issues around climate change, where we've been trying to think about how we can strengthen the scrutiny without burdening scrutiny. So maybe that's something to think about there. And I would hope that that will be a cross-party board. But I do welcome that. But I do have concerns, and I think that if you go back to the motion that Shropshire Council agreed in February, I think that some of the principles that are there have not quite made it in the way that I would have hoped. So when we voted for the motion in February, we said that we needed to shift towards a hierarchy of traffic reduction, modal shift, and electrification. And I don't get a strong enough sense, to be honest, of traffic reduction. This report talks about future mobility needs. And it does at times talk about, redesigning the way we do things, and it does make points about, for example, broadband connectivity and about local services, which is clearly about reducing need. But if that's a principle, then it needs to be upfront, and it needs to be loud. It needs to be made loud, I think. And I'm not sure that it is yet. That we're clear that the role of LTP is not simply to provide, that is to actually shape something, and then that does go to the economic strategy, because that means that we have to be serious about local economies and 15-minute or 20-minute neighbourhoods and enabling that. So I'm not sure that we've got that message clearly enough yet. Some other aspects of that February motion which aren't in is we specifically said that we wanted public health to be an originator and a consultee in developing LTP, and I'm not seeing any evidence of that. And I think that we do need to recognise that it's there. There are health issues raised, but the term public health doesn't appear, neither in terms of the relationship with our own public health staff or just as a noun. So that's a bit concerning that we did vote for in February. And the third one is that we also voted that we needed to see an LTP which had specific carbon reduction targets, and that those were also annualised. And I need some reassurance that we're not going to slide back from that commitment that we made in February. So those are my concerns. And then just a more general point, which again is really about tone, really, and this is really more directed at leading members, I suppose. That we've had a number of recent balloons floated around things in North Shrewsbury, around the A5, around the A49 today, something about Craven Arms, around Original. And I do get it. I do understand that in a world of bids and grants and all that having a few on the shelf, oven ready, shovel ready schemes is really important, and that we do need to develop that. It's just concerning that they're nearly all about road development rather than some of the other aspects of improving connectivity. For example, why aren't we talking about the possibility of having a minor freight depot at Craven Arms rather than just talking about the road? That's on a rail line. It's a fantastic opportunity to develop the local economy around its rail connection rather than necessarily around the A49. So that's more about some of the if you like, some of the blue skies thinking that seems to be appearing at the moment, which I'd like to see more reflective of going back to that hierarchy of traffic reduction, modal shift and electrification.
Thank you very much. Just a question, the board, does that include any member of the council?
The
board, the performance board.
In which?
I'm sorry, in the recommendations, the last bullet point, agree that assuming cabinet approval of LTP4, a performance board chaired by the portfolio holder for transport is arranged. This is because the board would meet quarterly to review the implementation and performance of the approved plan, and the board would also oversee the production of an annual report on LTP4, which would be presented to this committee for further discussion prior to the general release to ensure progression. I'm just wondering if there is a member of the council on that could be on that.
I think.
Or would that be a distraction?
I think on that, Chair, that's an issue to work through. So there's the current operational delivery board, which is officers, and we sort of liaise to our portfolio holder briefings with our portfolio holders and deputy on that. That with the board for post approval, I know we have the oversight of that. There is the discussion there to be had, but certainly for me as the lead officer, being able to sort of report to that, knowing that there's an expectation of bringing forward updates and any sort of challenges on what we've been able to achieve would be useful. So there is a discussion in detail there to be worked through.
Dean, did you want to say something? I noticed you popped up on screen. Did you want to say anything about that?
I was coming in on a comment that Councillor Julian Dean had made, but I'm happy to wait until you've rounded off this conversation about membership of the board.
I think you're saying there's a discussion point there about a member being on there, because I'm thinking we've got some very good members on this committee and out of this committee who could possibly be ears on it, or would that hamper your work, do you think?
Well, I think that's a conversation to work through, but I wouldn't be opposed to that, and perhaps some of the discussions earlier on in the meeting about sort of the agendas and the pressures on this committee, having a sort of set aside for a key strategic project of the council might be useful. And if I may, just to pick up on some of Councillor Dean's points, just to come back, the report that we've sort of tried to lay out, Councillor Dean, is one about methodology and approach. So this is how we're approaching the implementation and the delivery. I think your points about decarbonisation and modes of travel are really valid, and public health, and absolutely. And as the sort of the drafts of the work start to come through, because as I've mentioned, we're about 50% of the way through of that. I'm sure in future iterations you will see that. So have confidence in that. So we were setting out a methodology and approach as regards sort of modes of travel. We will have the transport plan. All members are aware of the bus service improvement plan and its intentions there, the sort of the LC and also transport objectives and recommendations within the sort of the draft local plan as well. And again, the work that we're doing with colleagues in economic growth to make sure that there's a nice line from the local plan all the way through to the transport plan, all the way through to the LC with, and all the way down. So we are trying to bring those forward. We are trying to work on those, and we've got other aspects that are still in play. So the Mini Islands bid, we don't know. We haven't received any feedback from that. So there's working all that together and embedding that into key initiatives across the county, big town plan, I was just removing strategy, work that we're looking in other areas, and then other bids that will come forward, whether there's a round two of levelling up as well. So to integrate all of that. So you will see more detail as we progress on the work, which is about 50% complete.
Okay, Dean, did you want to answer that? You look like you're frozen. Either that or you're not blinking. It's frozen. Okay.
Chair,
okay, thank you. I have actually got to the Did you want to answer what was?
I think it was maybe what Councillor Carroll was going to add, which is actually it was the point that Councillor Dean made, which was actually things like the bus service improvement partnership and a range of those sorts of initiatives. I think are also demonstrations of a wider approach to not just kind of the development of highways, but the whole kind of use of road space and the sustainability of the transport that's on it, etc. This is the opportunity to get all of that balance. There's a lot of work going on in the Adrian Cooper side of the climate change team as well, and we're looking at and we had a very successful event on Saturday in relation to electric vehicles. We're also looking at green hydrogen. Just want to reassure members that whole backdrop to everything sustainable transport is also part of what we're looking at here.
Okay, I can see you're blinking now, Dean, so you're...
I am blinking. I have unfrozen. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to put a little bit of context into what Councillor Dean said. Yes, I've been talking a great deal as the Cabinet Member for Highways about some of the next generation of major infrastructure projects that we would be looking to seek national funding for, including dualling of the A5, road safety improvements in the A49, the Pantlan and Munnock bypass. But what is also going on, as Steve Brown's alluded to, we've only recently submitted a £98 million bid for the Bus Back Better campaign, which is to upgrade our county-wide bus network. I'm having conversations about Baschurch Station and Whitchurch Station, about reopening Baschurch Station. We've got the land set aside. We just need to secure the financing for that. I'm having conversations about Whitchurch Station. Wider pieces, we're talking now seriously to WEM about supporting WEM to develop a town-wide regeneration bid that we can submit. So it's not just, I don't think it's entirely fair to say that we're just looking at major road schemes, although we are looking at a lot of major road schemes, but we're looking at a whole lot of other schemes as well that we can leverage in outside investment, national government investment, Homes England investment, levelling up fund investment for the people of Shropshire.
Okay, thank you. If I could move now to David, and then I'll have Roger, and I'm going to wind this up. I'm very aware that we're coming up to the 2 hours. If anybody wants a 10-minute break before we go on to planning enforcement, I'm happy to do that. Or if you want to just carry on, that's fine too. Hands up who wants to continue. Well, actually, we'll let you speak first, Roger and David, and then I'll ask you the question. So it's David first.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I just sort of seeking some clarification, really. Just if you look at 3.2, the bullet point after the following risks associated refers to the LTP will be a lean, high-level document. Also in 3.7, it also makes the same reference to the LTP being a lean, high-level document, and says that that there will be supporting policies that need to be updated or developed, which require additional funding and staff resources to be identified. Now, what worries me is, are those policies things like carbon reduction, traffic reduction, electrification, all those issues which Councillor Dean was referring to earlier, which we'd like to be in here and which perhaps haven't appeared, haven't made it. Are those going to be in those supporting documents, and will they see the light of day?
We will be bringing forward as part of the work a number of sort of draft policies and policies to enable us to move forward on that, Councillor Vasmir. So we will be submitting some, and then there will be others that we will have to work on and identify as we move forward. So the answer is yes, there will be policies within there.
Thank you.
Can I just come back, Chair? Just because it does make reference to the report about resource funding and staff resource to be identified. So have you identified that? Funding to deliver the LTP, we've got that secured. That's done. There are no sort of funding or budgetary issues to deliver on the piece of work that we've commissioned through. So there's no issues about that. As we're starting to sort of conclude the discovery phase and we're into the sort of the drafting stage, if any other additional work comes out or there's any other additional pieces, then we would have to seek funding to do those, but we would manage that and we could utilise other sorts of budgets as appropriate to do that. And to give you an example of that, so we're aware of the Department for Transport has sort of raised its intention that in LTPs, that sort of decarbonisation should play a more sort of central role in setting those targets. The DfT haven't quite issued that guidance yet, and as said at the beginning of the discussion, we've got a meeting in the diary with the DfT this month to understand what that means. That might alter some of our plans, it might not, but in that annual review process, it might be that we have to embed that change in then. So we still need to understand, but we're aware of it, we've acted on it, and we've got a meeting arranged in the diary with the DfT in order that we can have those discussions and find a suitable way forward.
Okay, thank you. Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to look at the recommendations, and as you highlighted earlier,
I'm not sure where it would go to, or whether it would stay here or just go to Oxford. But the first 2 bullet points, I would suggest that we just note the progress, note the approach taken.
As opposed to
Agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're a scrutiny committee.
That's right.
So that we note them and see where it goes.
Okay.
On the 4th bullet point, request that a further report is viewed by this committee or whichever committee in your discussions can take it forward. And then in the next bullet point, I would support to say that the performance board should also have, and I'll suggest you are present because it's coming here, the chairman of the appropriate scrutiny committee as a member, because it's looking at performance and it's part of scrutiny, so that the more informed we are by yourself or whoever, the better. So I would ask.
If I could just interrupt, I wouldn't put myself in there. I would want someone who totally understands this. Actually, if I was going to propose them, would probably be Julian Dean, I'm guessing, or even David.
I've got a member of the appropriate scrutiny committee works, whatever.
Yeah, that's fine. We can add that on. So the recommendations now read. I'm quite happy with it. Everybody else is.
Yeah, I was going to add a recommendation, but
if I can just read these out. Note, and not approve, the progress made to date in line with the agreed approach for development in the next local plan, transport plan for Shropshire. Next line again starts note instead of approve, the approach taken for engagement with stakeholders and the public. Bullet point 4, request, and not agree, that a further report on the draft local plan is reviewed by this committee prior to submission to Cabinet for approval for public consultation. And then the last bullet point about the performance board, if we can put in there, agree that a performance board chaired by the portfolio chancellor is arranged, and then in brackets to include an appropriate member. Is that all right?
Yeah.
And then it is proposed that this board would meet quarterly. Yeah, very good. Is everybody happy with that? Can we vote on those recommendations?
I also propose an additional one.
Yes, sorry, and we'll take that separately. Yes, please do, Julian.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to add a recommendation that continued LTP development ensures that council decisions.
Can you read that bit louder and a bit slower so that the.
Okay, I've also written it down so I can.
Oh, that's all right.
Email it directly. Okay, so the additional recommendation is as follows: that continued LTP development ensures that council decisions in February, including the sustainable transport hierarchy principles, the involvement of public health and pathways to net zero, including interim targets, are fully embedded.
I think that's a very good recommendation, and that's doable by February, I'm assuming.
Yes, public health.
I'm just thinking of time scales. As soon as possible. Should we put as soon as possible rather than February, but no later than April?
Yeah, the recommendation was about February's decisions from last year.
Okay.
It was about making sure.
Okay.
I wasn't putting a deadline on.
All right. Okay. Sorry, I thought you were putting a deadline on. Yes, I'm happy to take that forward as a recommendation. If you can give it to Sarah after, please. Can we vote on that? Everybody happy with that? Yep. Thank you. Okay, and on that note, we can now move. Oh, well, do we want to move on, or do we want a 10-minute break? Everybody wants to move on.
Move on. Should be quite simple.
The majority seem to want to move on, Roger. Thank you. Okay, so in that case, we'll now move on to item 9, scrutiny planning enforcement and draft recommendations. It should be presented by Daniel, but he's not here. That's an interesting one. Yes. Yes, Paul.
Well, with the discussion we had.
We did have the discussion.
I'm quite happy to propose to go as it stands as it is. I think it's fantastic.
Question, Chairman.
You may
there was some information that Daniel said he would provide, and some information from the questionnaire at the start of the meeting. I can't see any reference to that in it. He said he would provide it sometime during the meeting. I don't know if it's here or not.
I'm not going to comment on that.
I can help you, Chair.
Yes, please.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. I can help you, Chair.
Yeah.
And this is a slide that we can circulate to all members if you haven't got it. But broadly, it's a set of facts and figures in relation to enforcement that relate from 1st of October 20 to 30th of September this year. So it's a full 12 months data. In terms of enforcement, we received 707 cases. At 379 in the north, 328 in the south. In terms of notices served, we served 19. In terms of cases closed, they closed 875. So really got on top of what was kind of a backlog from previous years. There's current cases in hand of 276. And there have been 7 appeals, which 3 are still in progress. 1 was allowed, 2 were dismissed, and 1 was withdrawn. So the performance is quite strong. It gives you that in a bit of a table, and I think that partly replies to some of the information that Mr. Malloy was after, and also I think what Roger.
Okay, and Roger, were you after Mr. Malloy's slide, were you?
I'd be interested to see some of that question that was raised at that time, because obviously it adds to that, and I would have thought it may affect a recommendation, because I couldn't see what discussion took place because I was pushed out, same as everybody else.
You were not pushed out, Roger. I won't have that. Thank you very much.
It was deleted. I was listening, and it came to an end.
I'm sorry, I'm not having that discussion.
All right, no, as I say, but however, I'm not aware of the reasons behind the recommendations. Neither do parishes or town councils, and I would like to ask some questions about the recommendations, why they say what they are, but I'd also like to gather any more information which has become available since it was reviewed by the last scrutiny committee.
Well, I'm going to take the recommendations as they stand. Roger. Yes, Paul.
Can I just say, if we don't recommend this today, it'll be kicked down the road.
I know, and it needs
we want to move forward quickly on this. We want results, we want parish councils to get the information.
I agree with you. Paul, what I would say, Roger, is that if we can be sent, if members of the committee can be sent that information, if there's something you wish to pick up after that, then
can I add to the recommendation?
But depends what it is and whether we approve it.
Right, that an updated list of all outstanding and past planning enforcement cases be sent to parish and town councils as soon as possible. I disagree with some of the others, but okay, but I think that is missing from it. Parish and town councils want to know what has happened in the past to comments that they put in. I know some parish councils have received that list as a pilot, but I would think that is good communications for all parish and town councils. And I'm not putting a date on it. I'm saying as soon as practicable, if you
I'm
wish.
not sure about going back and backdating and stuff like that, but I'll put it. I will
One
put
of my parish councils has, and it was part of a working pilot that officers sent out, because they are asking questions about it. Some of them might be outdated, okay, but they would like to have information on planning enforcement cases that have been brought to them, that they are aware in their area that may be outstanding or closed. They have no information on it at all. Some parishes have been informed, and I would like that to go throughout Shropshire.
Yeah. I'll put the recommendations as they stand, and I'll see if it falls, and if it falls, we'll come back to yours as well.
It's an amendment if you want to, Chairman.
Okay. If I can just ask, those in favour of Roger's amendment, can you put your hand up, please? 3. Okay. Can I have, in that case, can I go back to the original recommendations and ask people, please, are they going to vote for the recommendations as set out in the paper as we previously discussed? If you could put your hands up, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. I think I counted, right? That might have been 7. Could you do that again? I think it was 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and myself 8. Okay, so that is the recommendation is go forward. Thank you very much. And now we move to the Place Overview Committee Work Programme, which was also being presented by Daniel Webb. But can I say that we just leave it as it is and discuss it at the next meeting? Yes, please, David.
Yeah, just for once of being very boring, I do think the care contract needs to be reviewed by this committee, and I would hope that we can perhaps recommend to Daniel that goes further up the.
Well, it's down to us what goes on the, not up to Daniel, but what I would say is, when is the contract coming up again, Mark?
Steve?
Yes, 2023.
23. Oh, so we've got a bit of time. Right, I'll have a discussion and see where we can fit it in, because as you can see, we've got a very full programme, but you're not being boring.
Okay. But the other thing
Yeah.
is the WSP contract, I think, is under review now.
Yeah.
So I think that's something this committee should be aware of and should consider before we get too far down the track.
Okay, and when would be a timely time to look at the WSP contract?
A draft report is going to directors next week, so before it goes to Cabinet or Council, it's appropriate that it comes here.
Okay, Sarah, could you make Daniel aware of that, please, if that's okay? Right, thank you for that. And I don't think we need to take a vote on that. And the date of the time of the next meeting at the moment is Thursday, the 27th of January. And we'll see what happens with December. But thank you all for your patience this afternoon. It's been a long one. And thank you for your input. Thank you.
Christmas.
We're still live, everybody. We're still live.